Good evening. I'm Jake Ward, coming to you from the NBC News Bureau here in San Francisco. Here are some of the stories we are following now tonight. Amigos or enemigos? Tensions are high in Mexico City, where President Biden is meeting with his counterparts in a North American summit. On the table, differences over trade and crime between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. Meanwhile, arrests in El Paso. NBC News obtains exclusive video showing border agents and police arresting migrants in El Paso ahead of the president's visit there.
Gracias por hablar con nosotros, Jose. As you know, he said, that there are many people here that are suffering, and he asked the president to look at these people with a heart.
A parade of cyclones. That's what California is bracing for tonight, along with heavy rain and snow. We will have the forecast. Fair and Musk. The Twitter CEO's attorneys want to move an upcoming trial from this city, San Francisco, to West Texas. We'll explain why. And the future of racing. Will self-driving cars be heading to a racetrack near you?
Start your software and crank your engines.
We begin this evening at the National Palace in Mexico City, where President Biden is making the first visit to the country by an American president in nearly a decade. Tonight, he attended a bilateral meeting with President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. President Biden said he wanted to deepen the two countries' relationship.
Last month, we celebrated 200 years of bilateral relations with Mexico. And looking back on our shared history, it's clear that the stronger and safer we both are is when we stand together.
Next up, a trilateral meeting tomorrow with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. All three men are meeting for the 10th North American Leaders Summit, which has been casually dubbed the Three Amigos Summit. Dominating the discussion will be issues of trade and illegal drugs. But perhaps one topic looming larger than others, the migrant crisis at the U.S. and Mexico border. Yesterday, President Biden visited the southern border for the first time since taking office. And when asked by reporters what he learned during his trip to El Paso, he said, quote, "They need a lot of resources. We are going to get it for them." Now, before we get to what's happening in Mexico, there is some breaking news that we want to bring you. President Biden's lawyers have found classified documents while packing up a think tank office space in Washington, D.C., all in a locked closet this past November. They are from Biden's days as vice president. Now, I want to bring NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli in. He's in Mexico City tonight. Mike, first, let's begin with these classified documents. What do we know at this hour?
Yeah, of course, when we saw this headline initially today, first reported by CBS News, that the Justice Department was looking into the possession of these classified materials, it obviously brought immediate comparisons to the situation for former President Donald Trump. Of course, that search that was executed at Mar-a-Lago. In a statement tonight, Richard Sauber, a White House lawyer, says that the discovery of the classified docs in this case were made by President Biden's own lawyers. They were packing up, as you say, an office that the former vice president at the time held there in Washington, and they discovered these documents with markings of classification. They quickly, immediately, we're told, turned them over to the National Archives, to the Justice Department, alerted them. The Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who is actually here in Mexico with the president, he asked the U.S. Attorney in Illinois to oversee an investigation here, or at least a review of what these documents were, why they were in Biden's possession, and whether any laws may have been broken. Garland, we're told, asked this U.S. attorney in particular to look into this because he was a Trump appointee. He wanted to make sure there was no appearance of impropriety. We're told tonight, Peter Alexander reporting as well, that President Biden was informed of the fact that these documents were found just around the time that his own lawyers found them, November 2nd, and that he has no further comment from the White House at this time. But this is obviously going to be an ongoing matter, even if we're talking about some key differences, a much smaller number of documents than what were found at Mar-a-Lago, the fact that Biden's own lawyers found these and this was not subject of a search. There's still obviously the issues of legality here that are going to be probed for sure, especially by that new Republican Congress now taking over in the House.
Well, Mike, obviously we'll expect you to keep on top of that, and we appreciate what you're telling us about it. So let's turn now to what is going on where you are in Mexico City. As I understand it, this meeting began with a handshake and a hug, but there's a lot of tension, obviously, in this relationship these days. Tell us a little bit more about this meeting.
Yeah, obviously the U.S.-Mexico relationship is one of the closest we have, as we share a border, southern border in this case. And we've seen American presidents often make Mexico one of their first destinations, or have the Mexican president as one of the first foreign leaders they welcome. There has been some tension in the relationship between President Biden and AMLO, as they call him here, the Mexican president. You'll remember when President Biden hosted a summit of hemisphere leaders in Los Angeles in July, that AMLO boycotted that summit. And we saw a little bit of that tension resurface tonight as the two leaders had a bilateral meeting, the Mexican president raising what he called was the abandonment by the United States of its obligations to support other countries in North and Central America. President Biden responding that the U.S. is the largest provider of foreign aid across the board, especially in this hemisphere, but also in other parts of the world. Obviously, the tensions extend to other issues as well, and that'll be the subject of these conversations as they kick off officially that North American Leaders Summit tomorrow.
And Mike, obviously, Justin Trudeau is present as well, the Canadian leader. And I'm curious, what does the White House want now from this three-way conversation between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada?
Well, as it relates to migration, the United States has been really focused on trying to bring other countries in the hemisphere, particularly Canada and Mexico, with the resources to do so, to try to help ease this burden, to deal with some of the root causes that are leading to a surge in migration at the border. We've seen already Canada has agreed to, for instance, hire more agricultural workers from other countries in the hemisphere, take a lead role in helping to place some of those Haitian migrants. Remember, Canada has a significant French-speaking population, as does Haiti. There are obviously other issues, though, that the three leaders are going to talk about beyond migration. One of them is the proliferation of fentanyl. The president commenting tonight about the fact that 100,000 Americans have died as a result of fentanyl overdoses, wants Mexico in particular to ramp up enforcement and crack down on drug smuggling. He also wants to talk about trade. This is an interesting issue we saw when the French president visited Washington. We know there were some concerns about some of the new legislation President Biden signed into law related to clean energy, whether this was going to, while it helps the U.S. production market, hurt foreign suppliers of clean energy supplies. And so the similar dynamic is playing out with Canada and Mexico, as they're concerned about some of the provisions of that Inflation Reduction Act hurting the auto industries of their respective countries. So a number of other issues that they're going to be discussing here, a complicated agenda, but they're going to be doing their best to showcase ways in which they're working together to solve some of these common challenges.
NBC's Mike Memoli for us in Mexico City. Mike, thank you so much. Now, joining us is Arturo Sarucán. He's the former U.S. ambassador to Mexico. He served from 2007 to 2013, and he is a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. He is also president of Sarucán and Associates. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us. I want to first go to something that you wrote in the Daily Beast, and in which you struck what I would consider a fairly pessimistic tone for a former ambassador. Whether it's Washington naturally preoccupied with and focused on Russian aggression in Eastern Europe, or Mexico City's public policy mix and lack of appetite and vision, the fact remains, you wrote, that the opportunity to forge a more cohesive and forward-leaning North America may come to naught. Why is it that you worry that this could, in fact, come to nothing, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, because as I mentioned in the piece, as you've been discussing, there are huge opportunities today for North America. For starters, the decision by the U.S. government to recalibrate its relationship with China. And when it comes to trade and economic development and the transition to a digital economy in North America, if that U.S. recalibration is going to succeed, Jake, Canada and Mexico need to be an integral part of that, whether it's with essential supply chains, which were disrupted in the pandemic, and which were also the impact that they had on prices, on inflation, on availability of goods. And remember, one of the secrets of what has happened in North America is that you don't produce U.S. goods anymore. You're producing North American goods because of how integrated these supply chains and production platforms have become. So how do we deepen those supply chains in North America? How do we use energy to ensure a North American paradigm of energy security, energy resilience, energy sustainability, energy independence. And when you have a Mexican government that, contrary to its two North American partners, seems to be going backwards towards fossil fuels with the building of refineries, there's a bit of a mismatch between the opportunities and the reality on the ground. When you look at foreign policy and you look at Ukraine and you look at Cuba and Venezuela, Nicaragua, as you mentioned, as your reporter mentioned from Mexico City, López Obrador boycotted the LA summit because he was opposed to having Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua not invited to the summit. The president's pro-Russian neutrality on Ukraine, when North America should be aligned on how to confront a violation of international law and premeditated aggression. So what I think is the real issue here is that you've got a huge opportunity to move North America forward, but the reality on the ground may be a bit different.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, you've spoken here about the shared goals that the North American partnership could pursue. I also want to talk here, of course, about some of the shared challenges. One, of course, is the drug trade. As you heard Mike Memley mention there, the rise of fentanyl here in this country is of tremendous concern to the Biden administration. But I also know that, that AMLO's policy has been very much hugs, not bullets, right? I believe is the tagline that he uses. And I'm curious,
I would call it hugs for thugs, but yes.
Hugs for thugs. Interesting. Well, I want to understand from you, how does that policy differ from when you were ambassador, and how can President Biden change that policy in Mexico if he feels he needs to?
This is one issue which is particularly relevant to the bilateral agenda between Mexico and the United States. It's not going to be as prevalent during the trilateral North American discussion, but it is one of the most salient issues. It is one of the greatest concerns of the bilateral agenda. It has been, Jake, for a long time. I think the principal challenge is to underscore that these two countries, Mexico and the United States, will not be able to move the needle on drug trafficking, drug consumption, unless we work together. Joint responsibility has to be the name of the game. And whereas Mexico needs to up the ante, improve its ability to prevent drugs, now mainly fentanyl, from coming from Mexico to the United States, Mexico still requires the U.S. to do a much more muscular job and effort to prevent guns and bulk cash from crossing in the other direction from the United States into Mexico. And that is what is providing organized crime in Mexico with the firepower and the resources to confront the state.
Well, former Mexican ambassador to the U.S., Arturo Sarkhan, thank you so much for giving us that important context. We appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Now, in the lead up to President Biden's visit to the southern border, officers with Customs and Border Protection, as well as El Paso police, began arresting migrants sleeping in the street outside of a Catholic church. And it was all captured on video obtained exclusively by NBC News. It happened last week. In the video, Border Patrol agents can be seen on the streets rolling up in vehicles with flashing lights and rustling tents where people were sleeping. The person who took the video tells NBC News that up to 150 migrants were arrested and that more were taken into custody later in the week. NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley joins us now. Julia, thank you so much for being here. Tell us more about what went on the ground there.
Well, Jake, we know that this was Tuesday night. That was the start of it. And then there were more arrests throughout the week. I spoke to CBP, Customs and Border Protection in El Paso, and they said that this was part of an effort to try to apprehend migrants that had evaded apprehension, who had walked across the border, had not been held and processed by CBP, which is part of the process, determine who these people are, determine whether or not they can stay in the country. But it also could be in violation of DHS policies. Some immigration law experts I spoke to pointed me back to an October 2021 memo from Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas that said that not only are courts and houses of worship considered safe spaces, but the proximity around them may also be considered safe if making arrest in the exterior would keep people from accessing those safe places. And so the fact that these arrests took place so close to Sacred Heart Church, which is really where most of the migrants were seeking shelter, at least when I was there 2 weeks ago, the fact that they were arrested on the street there could raise questions about whether or not it was in violation of that policy. Also, some people raised questions, said, A cynic would say this was an effort to sanitize the situation ahead of the president's visit. But again, CBP strongly denying that allegation.
Well, so that's so interesting, right? You're hearing, I mean, what I'm hearing from you, right, is that not only was this in violation, in theory, of existing policy, but yeah, the optics right ahead of this are there. So it doesn't sound as if you've gotten a huge amount of comment from DHS about this, at least not enough to satisfy you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they're just saying that they were in the right to make those arrests because these are people that had evaded apprehension at the border. And so legally, while they're still within 100 miles of the border, CBP can make those arrests. Further inside the country, that's ICE. Oftentimes, they'll have a warrant to go in and conduct a raid. CBP can do more closer to the border, but still a lot of questions. And it's maybe something that could be reviewed later. But right now, no, DHS has not said that they see any problems with this.
So, Julia, before I let you go, tell us a little bit about this letter that, as I understand it, Governor Greg Abbott hand-delivered to President Biden on the tarmac. What do you know about that?
Well, it's definitely another very public display from the Texas governor to try to push the issue of immigration as close to the president, right under his nose as time as possible. As you know, he's the same governor that bused migrants to D.C. and to other cities across the country starting in late spring, and he continues to do so. In this letter, he said that it was time for the president to continue and finish the construction of the border wall started by Trump. He wanted much more money coming down there, and he also said that there was not necessarily any reason for Congress to pass new laws, but that they needed to be enforcing the laws in place. He called on him to send more people back under Title 42, those COVID-19 restrictions. But it has to be said, just last week, the Biden administration did expand some of those policies and are tougher than some of those that the president previously said he would stick to when he first came into office.
Julia Ainsley for us. Julia, thank you so much. In Brazil, authorities have detained some 1,500 people in connection with storming government buildings in the capital city of Brasilia yesterday. Those people are supporters of far-right former President Jair Bolsonaro. The scenes yesterday were reminiscent of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol in 2021. And like Donald Trump's supporters then, Bolsonaro's supporters falsely believed that the election was stolen. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva won Brazil's election in October and was sworn in as president last week. Today, shortly after swearing in, the new American ambassador to Brazil, Vice President Kamala Harris, spoke about yesterday's attacks.
This was an obvious and clear attack on a democratic process, and we condemn it, of course. I will also say that, as I've said to the Ambassador Bagley, that I'm very confident in her ability to represent the United States and to extend to President Lula all that we mean in terms of the work that we will do together as allies.
Sam Brock joins us now from Miami. Sam, you're there in Florida. That is where the former president is. What is the reaction like among the enormous Brazilian population where you are?
You know, it's been an interesting snapshot, Jacob, and good to be with you. The results of the election were 51% for Lula and 49% for Bolsonaro. When you talk to folks here, you definitely get a sense that there's a fracture of thought. I spoke to a young guy with young children who talked about the fact that it just makes him sad. This is the opposite of progress when he sees what looked like a nightmare that's already played out in the United States happen back in his home country. His name is Alan Lemos. Here's what he told me.
We need to be able to trust government, trust the process, trust the people that we elect to be there. And nowadays with, all these different sides coming up and saying that your truth is not true anymore because, you come from right wing or left wing, I think we're losing the focus, the big picture, which is, to live in a democracy.
Now, Jake, the flip side of that is another woman that I'd spoken with. Her name was Ellen. Just before I did that interview, she said the opposite, that I can't believe that our government is forcing presidents upon us, not the ones that we picked. And she even said that the voting machines have been changed. She said, you know, she's parroting the language that Bolsonaro was disseminating, that all these voting machines had the votes just switched in the middle of the night, and they are left picking up the pieces right now. And so that just gives you some sense of how different people are viewing this situation very differently.
It is so fascinating to see these people occupying totally different realities, and that you are seeing that there on the ground firsthand. You know, thinking about the alternative reality that was January 6th here in this country, I mean, tell us about the parallels you're seeing between these two places. I mean, how are lawmakers from Bolsonaro's side responding to this, and how is the current president, President Lula, responding to this as well, Sam?
So Lula has sought out certainly help from other countries around the globe, not just the United States, but we've seen Britain weigh in, Spain, Italy, Germany, all these Western European nations and Western nations in general condemning this and saying this is not going to be a playbook that we're going to be looking at over and over again. This stops now. But in terms of just the parallels, Jake, I mean, they are incredibly strong and evocative as you look at these images, right? You had people using makeshift weapons like barriers and poles to break into Congress, not just Congress, but also the Supreme Court, also the presidential palace. Now, some of the differences, the lawmakers in this case weren't actually inside when this was all playing out. And also, it appears there are some videos out there that show concerning situations with local police, not the federal police, but local police potentially assisting the protesters in getting inside. That is not something that we saw on January 6th with Capitol Police demonstrating such incredible bravery. There are some differences here, but the parallels are also haunting.
The parallels are very haunting, and let us hope that hope that you heard, that this won't be a playbook for the future. Let's hope that bears out. Sam Brock for us in Miami. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Jake.
The images are just awful. After a week of deadly storms, more bad weather is in store for us here in California. People still do not have power, and thousands are now being told to evacuate their homes. Next, what to expect tonight and when we might finally see some relief. Right now, here in California, where I'm sitting, more than 30 million people, nearly our entire population, are under a flood watch across the state. Evacuation orders are in place for everyone in the town of Montecito and other parts of Santa Barbara as the storm makes its way through central California. Local authorities asking residents to, quote, leave now. Santa Cruz County was hit especially hard today. The California Highway Patrol reported flooded roads, log-jammed rivers, and landslides as a result of the heavy rain. This is the first of a series of storms expected to rip through the region this week. By Wednesday, parts of central California may see up to a foot of rain. It's hard to articulate how unusual that is. And up in the mountains, there may be up to 6 feet of snow. NBC national correspondent Miguel Almaguer joins us now from Santa Cruz. Miguel, tough week for California. Give us a sense of what it's like on the ground where you are.
Well, Jake, the rain here has finally stopped, but we're getting a better picture of the damage. Take a look behind me. That used to be a sidewalk, but it's crumbled hundreds of feet down into the Pacific Ocean. Damage like this is really evident all across the area over the last 24 hours or so. We've listened and watched all of these first responders get to flash flood warnings and evacuations for people all across this region. We also know across the state of California, hundreds of trees have come crashing down, actually taking at least 2 lives. The disaster here is still unfolding. Even though the rain has stopped, there's a major concern in cities like Montecito, where there's mass evacuations underway, that we could be facing mudslides over the next 24 to 48 hours. Keep in mind here, all of California is incredibly saturated over the last week and a half of storms. Any more additional rain is just going to loosen the soil. It's going to loosen trees in this area, and that's the big concern. Though the rain has stopped, mudslides and rock slides remain a major issue, Jake.
Miguel Almaguer looking at the extraordinary damage here in California for us. Miguel, thank you. This is, of course, the first of many storms expected to hit us here in California this week. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns joins us now with the forecast. Bill?
Jay, it's been a difficult day. I mean, this atmospheric river pointed at California since early this morning. We've seen from Santa Cruz now all the way down to Santa Barbara and everywhere in between, just a ton of rain falling on saturated soil. We have mudslides, we have highway closures, we have debris flows where we had burn scars, we got trees on houses, trees on cars, we got rivers that have peaked and have overflowed their banks, evacuations in numerous communities. I mean, this is about as bad as it's been in California from a storm in a long time. And right now, that fire hose of moisture, what we've been calling the atmospheric river, is pointed here right at the Santa Barbara area, and this is where we have a lot of issues right now with water everywhere. Anything that used to be dry, all the runoff spots are now overflowing. There are some lakes that haven't been filled up in 4 or 5 years that are now overspilling. So we've added so much water in a short period of time. And here's a zoom-in radar. But notice a lot of it hasn't made it to Los Angeles yet. That'll happen overnight into early tomorrow morning. And most of it has still been just lingering here to the north. And of course, in the highest of elevations, we're getting that heavy snow, but it's way up there. We're above like 7,000 to 8,000 feet to get into the snow. So here's that huge area. This whole maroon section here, including all of Santa Barbara County, is under a flash flood warning or a flood warning. And there's other little spots here where we have the burn scars and we have a couple of rivers that have problems. We have one levee that we know that overflowed its banks. So again, numerous problems out there. California Highway Patrol's got roads closed all over the place. There have been water rescues during the days. It's been kind of nuts. And as I mentioned, tomorrow and late tonight, it shifts over Los Angeles and Santa Ana and San Bernardino. So this is a moderate risk for flash flooding late tonight and through the day tomorrow, especially in the mountainous areas. This is the additional rainfall. You know, many areas have already picked up 2 to 4 inches, but in the mountains here, just north of Los Angeles, wherever you see this darker color, that's potential for 4 inches of rain on soggy soil. So we're going to see a lot more pictures tomorrow, just like we did today. Same thing. All those runoff areas, the mud flows, the debris flows, road closures, stuff like that's going to happen all over again. The winds, we didn't see really crazy winds today like we could have seen. We did have 109 mile per hour gust in the Sierra at the highest of elevations. We have about 100 to 200,000 people without power. Over the weekend, it got up to almost 500,000. So compared to that, it's been a little better, but the water has been worse. In the Grapevine, we could get up to 65 mile per hour winds. I don't think we're going to see many power outages in San Bernardino and heading down towards Santa Barbara and L.A. And the highest of elevations we could see in the next couple days, another 3 to 6 feet of snow. I saw a stat today that Mammoth Mountain, California, has already picked up 25 feet of snow this winter. That's what they typically do in an entire winter season. So pretty crazy stuff. So this is Storm 1, Jake. Storm 2, this is coming in tomorrow behind it. Won't be as bad. Still additional rain. And then Wednesday into Thursday, another storm coming in. Again, it's not going to be these crazy atmospheric rivers like today, but because it's so soaked, there's no place for this water to go. We'll have additional problems.
You know, Bill, I mean, just thinking about no place for water to go. I was up at 5:45 this morning to dig. I'm here in the Bay Area, as you know, and I was under my house digging out a channel alongside, trying to keep water from getting further in under
Did it
my
work?
basement. No, I mean, sort of, but not really. No, we are not at all prepared for this. And so I just have to ask you, you do always such a fantastic job of letting us understand what's coming in the next couple of days, maybe the coming week. Tell me about the future, brother. How many mornings am I waking up years from now digging out a trench next to my house? Is this the new normal for California?
Well, that's the question, right? I mean, we've been talking about a mega drought for 20 years, so people have kind of forgotten, like, what California can be like in the wintertime. Like the El Nino we had in 97, if you talk to anyone who lived through that, it was like this all winter long, what we were experiencing in the last 2 weeks. So I think, you know, the last 20 years, Jake, was kind of like, oh, you know, it's never going to rain, never going to flood. And now we're seeing what California is potentially like. You got mountains and you have an ocean right near each other, and that can be a recipe for disaster like we're seeing.
Bill Caron's reminding me that we should have borrowed against our house and redone our drainage. Thank you so much, Bill. Appreciate it. After the break, more of the top stories we are following this hour, including Damar Hamlin being discharged from the hospital 1 week after collapsing on the field. Plus, thousands of nurses in New York are on strike. Why contract negotiations there have failed. And 100 prisoners involved in an exchange. We have a report from Kyiv on that swap. Stay with us. Time now for some of the big headlines we are watching tonight. Damar Hamlin is back in Buffalo after suffering cardiac arrest just last week. The 24-year-old Bills safety collapsed during a game against the Cincinnati Bengals in what appeared to be a routine tackle. Originally in critical condition, Hamlin has since progressed to good condition before being transferred this afternoon. Now, in New York, the athlete shared some appreciation, tweeting, "The docs and nurses at Buffalo General have already made me feel at home." A racketeering trial involving rapper Young Thug is now underway. The Atlanta-based artist is accused of co-founding a criminal street gang and promoting it with his music. The sprawling indictment issued last May cites multiple references to his lyrics as evidence. Young Thug has pleaded not guilty to all 8 charges against him. In Georgia, a special grand jury just completed an investigation into Donald Trump. Their objective was to uncover any coordinated attempts to unlawfully alter the outcome of the 2020 election. The ruling issued today did not say what the group's findings were. Their recommendations were submitted to the Fulton County DA, who will now decide what comes next. Police in Virginia are revealing new details tonight on a school shooting that left a 25-year-old teacher seriously injured after being intentionally shot by a 6-year-old boy. Abigail Zwerner then escorted her students out of the classroom while wounded. Authorities say the bullet went through her hand and into her upper chest, but she is now in stable condition. Police also adding today that the 6-year-old suspect brought the gun from home. And finally tonight, the Supreme Court is reviving claims of faulty DNA evidence against a Texas death row inmate. Aureli Escobar was convicted of murdering a 17-year-old girl back in 2009. But after his conviction, a state investigation found widespread errors and bias in the police department's DNA lab. In a rare move, state prosecutors are now agreeing the evidence was faulty, sending Escobar's case back to an appeals court in Texas. Thousands of nurses from 2 New York City hospitals went on strike this morning after contract negotiations over pay and staffing broke down over the weekend. Here is what one nurse had to say about the walkout.
I think we're all out here because we find it very important to put our patients first. And we want to take care of our patients. It doesn't matter. We want to make sure they're getting the best care. We need enough nurses to be able to care for those patients. And we need to make sure that we're getting our breaks so we're rested enough to care for these patients.
The strike forced the hospitals to divert ambulances, transfer patients, and postpone non-emergency surgeries. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard has more.
Good evening. These negotiations continue between these 2 medical facilities, the one in Manhattan and the other in the Bronx. We're talking about around 7,000 nurses who were set to be on the picket line, not going in to work into these 2 major New York City hospitals. This is a situation in which we looked at weeks of negotiations that broke down in the early hour mornings this Monday. And ultimately, you have the Nurses Association, which said that turned down the initial offer here from the hospitals. And, you know, the nurses that I had conversations with said this is not for them about compensation, but instead this is about the staffing shortages that have plagued these hospitals, especially over the course of the last 3 years, making the case that it is no longer good enough to just be hailed as pandemic heroes, but instead that they need fair contracts, that they're talking about working multiple days of 12-hour shifts with no or few breaks. And, you know, as one nurse I talked to said that she's been working here in New York City for 41 years, has never gone on strike before this. Now the hospitals say that, you know, there were initially 10 hospitals that were facing strikes. 8 of them came to agreements with their respective nurses associations. And yet there are these 2 holdouts here. And yet you're looking at hospitals that are now diverting ambulances away. There's the likes of mothers who have just delivered babies who have had to switch hospitals. Elective surgeries have ended here at these hospitals. This is real life implications that are playing out in real time here. At the same time, the nurses are making the case that they are going to the picket lines and going on strike for the betterment of patients going forward into the future, and that they are able to offer their patients the best care that they can.
Vaughn Hilliard for us in New York. Let's head now to Ukraine. Over the weekend, Russia and Ukraine swapped 50 prisoners each. It was the 36th prisoner exchange since this war began. On Twitter, a top Ukraine official celebrated the news and shared pictures of the Ukrainian soldiers back at home. Meanwhile, Russia ended its self-declared Christmas ceasefire and launched dozens of attacks over the past 24 hours. NBC's Matt Bradley has the latest from Kyiv.
Well, beyond the front lines today, we saw continued Russian shelling just a day or two after that aborted attempt to have some sort of Christmas truce that was unilaterally declared by Moscow and laughed off by Kyiv. We saw bombings in the eastern part of the country and in the northeast around the northeastern city of Kharkiv. A marketplace was struck, killing 2 women and injuring 4 others, including a young girl. All of this, according to Reuters news agency. But on the front lines, we're continuing to see a lot of very fierce fighting around the city of Bakhmut, and just in the past couple of weeks, around the city of Soledar to the northeast of Bakhmut. This area, right on the fringe of the Russian-held part of the Donbass region in the east, has become the battle royale of this war as it goes into its second year at the end of February. We've seen massive losses of life on both sides for an area that a lot of people say, a lot of military analysts say, isn't necessarily all that strategically important. In many ways, this has become a proving ground for both sides, particularly not just for the Russian military and military regulars, but for that private military contractor, the Wagner Group, which is led by Yevgeny Prigozhin. Now, this man has emerged as one of the leaders on the battlefield, and it seems as though, with what he's doing in Bakhmut and elsewhere in that region, that he has something to prove and may have political ambitions for himself. Meanwhile, the fight around that area and all along the 800-mile front line here in Ukraine continues. Matt Bradley, NBC News, Kyiv, Ukraine.
Matt Bradley up late for us in Ukraine. Tonight, House Republicans passed a rules package. Now, on its surface, that sounds like boring federal bureaucracy, right? But no, this one is very important. Typically, these packages don't get much attention, but this package stands out, especially after the days-long speakership battle last week. This rules package is what got Kevin McCarthy enough votes to become Speaker of the House. Now, this is a set of guidelines here that will determine how the chamber governs for the next 2 years. Most notably, if one Republican member of Congress is unhappy, well, they can call a vote to recall the House Speaker. Joining us now is NBC News senior congressional reporter Scott Wong. Scott, thank you so much for being here. I've been reading your reporting on this all day. I mean, normally a rules package is just pro forma, right? It's supposed to be just boring bureaucracy. I mean, what stood out to you about this one?
Absolutely. Normally, a rules package is a very mundane type of thing. Generally, it passes without any controversy. But given the last few days, the last week on Capitol Hill, especially in the House of Representatives, with that turmoil and the speaker's race and all of the chaos that we saw on the House floor, this was an important vote for Republicans to show that they could be united behind a package of rules that will, as you said, govern how they will rule the House for the next 2 years. Specifically, what stood out to me, obviously, is what a lot of people have been talking about for all week is this motion to vacate the Speaker's chair. Essentially, what that does is it gives a single lawmaker the power to force a vote on the House floor to oust Kevin McCarthy, the new Speaker of the House, in the middle of this congressional term. For the next 2 years, this will be hanging over Kevin McCarthy's head if some of these hardline conservatives don't like what he is doing. They can force that vote at any time. In addition, there are a couple of select committees that will be formed by House Republicans through this rules package. One focused on the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic, and secondly, one focused on what they are calling the weaponization of the federal government against American citizens. So these are some of the important highlights of this rules package.
Now, Scott, you know, we've seen, of course, this incredible fight on McCarthy's part to get into the speakership. In this case, only one vote went against him on the rules package. That was Tony Gonzalez of Texas. You know, was this, do we call this easier, or do you think that the trouble has just begun for the McCarthy era here?
Yeah, I think what we saw on the House floor last week with those 15 ballots for Speaker of the House over the course of 4 or 5 days just absolute turmoil on the House floor. That is a glimpse of things to come in this GOP-led House of Representatives. There was some dissension, as you mentioned, in this rules package. Let's hear from Tony Gonzalez himself, who objected to some of the concessions that McCarthy had to give to these conservatives.
I'm against the rules for a couple different reasons. One is the defense spend, the cut in defense. Yes. I think that's an absolutely terrible idea. But the other is to vacate the chair. I mean, I don't want to see us every 2 months be in lockdown. This isn't the parliament. I mean, the American public are counting on House Republicans to be the one savior in this all. If we can't get this right, it's going to be a nightmare after nightmare.
And Gonzalez, obviously one of the pragmatists of the Republican conference, saying we can't keep doing this over and over again, having turmoil. We can't, try to force McCarthy out and be in this situation where we're having these votes for speaker over and over throughout these next 2 years. That's not going to bode well for our reelection chances. That's not going to present a good face for the American people and for voters heading into 2024.
Scott Wong keeping an eye on the tumultuous beginning of the McCarthy speaker area. Scott, thank you so much. And now the latest on the brutal murders of 4 people at a marijuana farm in Oklahoma. Our Jacob Soboroff is on the ground with one of the responding officers to discuss the case and the increase in organized crime in the area. Why authorities are saying they were not surprised by the murders that shocked that community.
Body.
A shocking scene in rural Oklahoma.
Are there other people inside?
4 killed execution style and 1 wounded on what authorities say is an illegally operating marijuana farm. An act of revenge for money owed to an investor, according to court documents filed during the suspect's arrest. The farm is one of over 8,000 in Oklahoma licensed to grow medical marijuana. But like many in the area, it was diverting weed to the black market instead. Jonathan Riedlinger was one of the first officers to arrive on the scene, and he brought our team there.
With the much money that's coming in here, with as much marijuana is here or leaving, it just figured just a matter of time before something was going to happen.
Law enforcement tells NBC News international criminal organizations are operating right in America's heartland, committing fraud to obtain legal marijuana licenses and exporting product all across the U.S. at a huge profit.
The criminals are growing for $100 or less a pound and making $4,000 on the East Coast. So there's no mystery of why the criminals are coming here, and even some of the legitimate growers have gone to the criminal side.
Last year, agents in Oklahoma say they raided 9 illegal marijuana farms with alleged ties to Chinese organized crime. On those farms, they found suspected victims of human trafficking, which we also encountered during a police raid of an illegal grow in California last year.
The person or people who brought you here, did they tell you the truth about what you were coming to do?
No, they didn't tell her that. If they told her it would be like this, she wouldn't have come.
Outside of Oklahoma City, we located the legal owner of the farm where the killings took place. He was also the shooting's lone survivor. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, he told us. I'm in a lot of pain and can barely walk. Right after our meeting, that man, Yi-Fei Lin, was arrested, charged with manufacturing and trafficking marijuana, and now awaits trial.
Originally it was a dairy farm, now it's a grow farm.
Local Sheriff Dennis Banther estimates there are 80 licensed cannabis grows in his county.
Clear.
And worries the recent homicides might just be the tip of the iceberg, as trafficking victims are known to sometimes vanish without a trace.
I truly believe that there's probably been more violence than we've been documenting. I don't think this is an isolated incident.
Jacob Soboroff, NBC News.
Next, did Elon Musk manipulate Tesla's stock back in 2018? Well, that is what a California court is going to decide. Or maybe it won't. After the break, why Musk's attorneys are trying to move this trial to Texas because of alleged, quote, local negativity. That's just ahead. Elon Musk is not feeling the love here in California. At least that's what he's claiming to a federal judge in San Francisco. His legal team is pleading to have a trial moved from the city by the Bay to western Texas, citing, quote, local negativity. He says that the court will not be able to find unbiased jurors here in San Francisco because of it. He and other Tesla board members are set to face a jury in a class action lawsuit stemming from this tweet in 2018 in which he said he might take Tesla private at $420 a share. Shareholders said that Musk knowingly manipulated the market with that tweet, and they are suing as a result. Joining us now is the Wall Street Journal reporter Tim Higgins. He is also a CNBC contributor, and he's author of Power Play, Tesla, Elon Musk, and the Bet of the Century. Tim, thank you so much for being here. I want to start first by reading a little bit of Elon Musk's legal team's complaint. In it, they really make a sort of an amazing argument. They say a substantial portion of the jury pool in this district is likely to hold a personal and material bias against Mr. Musk as a result of recent layoffs at one of his companies, as individual prospective jurors or their friends and relatives may have been personally impacted. So I'm thinking about this. Okay, I assume they are talking here about Twitter, which Elon Musk recently acquired, and then he fired a lot of people. I was doing the math in my head. I'm sitting here in San Francisco, right? There's fewer than 1 million people here in San Francisco. He fired a few thousand people. I don't know what the percentage is exactly, but I'm curious what you make of that argument.
Well, just a few blocks from the studio that you're in, just a few weeks ago when Dave Chappelle had an event for a stadium full of people, Elon Musk made an appearance and people booed him. Now, Musk disputed that it wasn't everybody booing him, but nevertheless, there were a lot of people unhappy with him there. And I've got to say, in San Francisco on Friday, getting my haircut, my barber just wanted to talk about Elon Musk and the drama at Twitter. This is the hot story, the hot topic in San Francisco at the moment. And lawyers are saying that Elon Musk's team seems to be making kind of a Hail Mary in an effort to get a new venue or perhaps delay further this trial.
I want to read you another thing that caught our eye. He's, I guess, in hot water again because of another tweet, this one out on New Year's Eve, in which someone else wrote, users with more than 10,000 miles on FSD beta, that's the steering, the self-driving mode in the Tesla, should be given the option to turn off the steering wheel nag, and he addressed that to Elon Musk. Elon Musk responds, agreed, update coming in January. As I understand it now, federal regulators are looking into this exchange. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, this is the driver assistance system that Tesla has in its vehicles. It's not a fully self-driving, fully automated system at all. The driver needs to be paying attention in case something occurs that the car can't handle. And what's going on here is the federal regulators are investigating these vehicles over a string of crashes over the years where these vehicles have been running into stopped emergency vehicles on highways. The question being, were these drivers paying attention when these cars crashed into fire trucks and ambulances and these sorts of things?
Tim Higgins with the never-ending drama that is the world of Elon Musk. Really appreciate your being here. Thank you. Now, take a look at this. I got to watch self-driving race cars in action, 200-mile-an-hour cars. When we come back, I'll give you a look at these robot cars and how these races could help researchers make our highways safer. Last week, I was at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. You may know it, right? It's an annual trade show for all things tech. Well, I got to witness what at first glance may appear to be a typical auto race, but it turned out to be anything but. Have a look.
It's all the sound and fury of race day.
Start your software and crank your engines.
But there's no medical staff, no helmets, no autographs, because no drivers. The Indy Autonomous Challenge brings robot cars built by university teams from around the world to compete at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway as part of the Consumer Electronics Show.
It's insane to think that these race cars have no driver.
It's really interesting watching this happen.
Self-driving cars are already learning to handle cities.
But this is a whole other kind of driving.
The cars race each other in one-on-one knockout rounds at nearly 200 miles per hour.
Making the pass on the bottom in the corner.
They're not remote controlled. These cars are driving and sometimes crashing themselves.
The only way to win is to have a better algorithm, a better autonomous software. So this is Indy Lights chassis.
They're mechanically identical, but each algorithm has a driving style.
The German team is very buttoned up. The Italian team maybe a little bit more risk-taking.
The fact that the cars are virtually the same hardware-wise, and the majority of it is, data-driven and software-driven, is really neat.
The fans are here for the race, but it's secretly a research project.
Nobody has really pushed autonomous vehicles to this level before.
And what they test in these races could keep us safe on future highways.
Suspension systems was something that first came out of motorsports, and eventually, we have it in every single vehicle on our roads now.
Here they come to the outside, up in the gray stuff, and around they go.
After an all-day battle, the Italian team took the top prize.
Now, for the moment, these robot cars don't compare to a Formula One driver.
You think you'd get dusted by a true pro driver at this point?
At this point, I'm gladly admitting that yes, but in a few years, we could make it very competitive.
Now, the organizers say that the idea here is that eventually we won't be racing those cars. We're going to be napping inside them. That does it for us. I'm Jake Ward for Now Tonight. Stay with us. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.